Good evening, and welcome to Beware of Spoilers. Not Beware of Spoilers, 30-minute reviews. I am Adam. In the first episode of the new format, where we're going to be talking about movies. Well, new format, really the old format. We're back to the way we used to do things before I got really into covering news. And, I don't think that's really necessarily helpful at this point, considering... And I talked about it a little bit when we... made the announcement about why we're doing this. And it's this idea that in the world of entertainment news, if you're not first, you're last. That's kind of the way it is now. And the idea that I'm not able to get a story, get thoughts together on a podcast, and then record the podcast until between, at least 7 hours later in some cases, sometimes even less, it could be, it could be a problem. We're still going to do reactions, so, expect another episode on this feed. There's a new Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania trailer dropping today, and I would anticipate ticket sales are also going to be going on sale within the next few days. So we're still going to do that. So when you look at this and you're listening to this, you've probably already heard the Quantumania episode, but here we're going to talk about this. And part of the reason is I want to be more consistent this year, and I want to have better quality, which comes from using the microphone, not recording off my phone while I drive, which for reactions will still happen. But for our standard weekly movie discussion, we're going to do it like this. Man, I forgot the extra level of pressure recording in Audacity and not while driving, because I can look at how long I've been recording, which I can't do while I'm driving. To make sure the episode's long enough. And what we're going to talk about today is the 2010 movie Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which kind of became a who's who of major stars for the ensuing decade. Because Brie Larson's in it, who was going to be Captain Marvel. I would say Chris Evans, but he was coming off of that, and he would be Captain America in another year. Michael Cera was a huge name, before this, because of Juno in 2009 and because of Superbad in 2008. And I think that, Jason Schwartzman's in it. Mae Whitman's in it. She was kind of something before that, though. She was Katara, and she was in Independence Day. You have all these major people in this movie, and it's very heavily stylized. I do have problems with the movie, which I think, had I not been in 8th grade or 10th grade when this movie came out, and I was doing movie reviews, I probably would not have liked it, considering that I've watched it now, and I didn't particularly care for it. I understand what it's doing. And first of all, I'm not entirely sure. I'm fairly certain Scott's not meant to be a sympathetic character. He's not a good person. And I'm not saying you need to have a good person as the lead of your movie. Look at Christopher Nolan and what he's made a career of doing. I mean, every one of Christopher Nolan's protagonists is not necessarily a great person. They're flawed and all that. And it's not like when you look at Clerks or other, or young adult slacker movies, they're just kind of low achieving and all of that, which is what Scott is, because he's pursuing the dream of being a musician. And I think that when you look at how he acts in this movie, I mean, first off, we're introduced to him, and everyone around him's kind of you're 22 years old, you're dating a 17-year-old, that's really fucked up, which is not inaccurate. And, on top of that, we're supposed to, you feel bad for Knives through the entire movie, because Knives just gets fucked over and over again throughout this entire movie, because Scott just wants to get with Ramona the entire time after he sees her in a dream, and she is the manic pixie dream girl that he's just in love with. And then there's kind of so he's got to defeat the evil ex-boyfriend so he can date Ramona, but at the same time, it's why? That's never really explained why. Why does he need to fight them? And look, it's all funny and it kind of works, but there's not really a great underlying plot thread between point A to point Z in this movie, which I'm not saying is essential for this, but considering like the best of like, I mean, really, it feels like a video game boss rush game where we don't necessarily need to have a connective tissue that's that necessarily strong. Like you just need to have something there to understand it in the way that like John Wick, we need to sit here, we need to understand why it's okay for John to murder all of these people and just kind of be okay with it. Like that's really all it is. Like when the dog gets killed and the car gets stolen in the beginning of the movie, it's just here is the pretense for you to be okay with the fact that he's going to just blindly murder hundreds of people over the course of the next 3 to 4 movies. And here the only reason that we know that they're dickish ex-boyfriends is because, or evil ex-boyfriends, is because we're told that. And we don't see what they did to Ramona that even creates her perception that they're evil. And it's like, I think seeing from her perspective what happened would have gone a long way to me being like, okay, I understand what happened here. But like, the idea even that Gideon's the one who forms the Legion of Evil Ex-Boyfriends, and you're like, alright, well, it doesn't quite make sense in a real way, where I'm like, okay, well, whatever. I don't think that enough is done there. And if that's done, the movie does make a lot more sense and is a lot cleaner, but it doesn't do that. There's also the issue where Scott, I don't think, needs to learn self-respect to end his character arc in this iteration. Maybe it's that way in the graphic novel. I haven't read the graphic novel, but I don't think in this iteration Scott's lack of self-respect is the issue. Because it depends on how you define self-respect. I mean, he doesn't have self-worth, I think, is the issue more than self-respect. Because a narcissist will inherently have self-respect, in so much as they respect themselves more than anyone else on the planet. Whatever else is going on around them is less important than what's going on in their own head and what's going on for their own personal needs. And that's kind of where Scott is. He's cheating on Knives with Ramona, and at the same time cheating on Ramona with Knives in a weird situation in the beginning of the movie. Not because he doesn't respect himself, but because he only respects himself. He doesn't respect anyone else around him. It's all about him, be it his bandmates, be it his other exes, be it anyone else in his life. The only person that Scott respects is himself. And him getting self-respect isn't the issue. It's he needs to acknowledge self-worth outside of his relationship to other people. And I think that's the bigger issue Scott has. And I think by defining it that way, it allows him to treat other people as humans and not just as their role defined to him. And I think every character in this movie kind of has that problem, and every character in this movie kind of has that self-centeredness to them, where it's like they all need to, for lack of a better word, get their heads out of their own asses and become someone in a more macro sense of what is, you know, where they are in the world, beyond just themselves. And I think that's kind of the biggest problem with the movie, is that it's like, because of this misunderstanding, like, I think that if Scott was a more likable guy, and I think that the first thing they can do is fix the age issue. I mean, and even then, it's like, out of the gate, Scott has this girl who is totally into him. And I think even aging her up to be 18 or 19 wouldn't necessarily solve the problem entirely. Because you still have this girl who's just like head over heels for him and like totally in love with him. She's showing up at the concerts. They're doing dance or like a ninja version of Dance Dance Revolution. They're doing all these things together, and they're just clicking in that way. And then he sees a girl with different color hair, and he decides to go with her instead. And then you get this moment where Knives is just, you know, oh, he likes the hair, that's what it is, and she's dyeing her hair, and you just feel for Knives the entire time. And watching the movie, you're like, he's not a likable guy in this situation. He's not a likable protagonist. And for a movie like this to really work, I think he needs to be a likable protagonist, because over the course of the movie, he really doesn't learn anything. He just gets he learns, quote unquote, something at the end of the movie because he has to, not because not because he actually learns something. It's like he beats the ex-boyfriends, but none of them really have any meaning. They're all kind of archetypes, but they're not even something that, like, this is reflective of something in Ramona's past or Scott's past that he needs to overcome himself. It's just, it's got cool effects, and it looks cool to have this fight, but it doesn't have any deeper meaning beyond just, oh, he's going to beat the fuck out of this guy because that's what the plot demands, that he beats the fuck out of this guy. It's a boss rush. Like, do I think that, each one being a different thing that, is wrong with Scott needs to be that? Like, one of the boyfriends, like, it could all be traits of Scott that are obviously maladaptive, where it's like one could be a boyfriend that she had when she was substantially younger, which I think Gideon is to an extent. Like she is way younger than him, and it's like that could be one thing. Like the obsessive, like, need to find the right, like, the way that he is with her and like stalking her to an extent. It's like that's something else. Like every maladaptive trait that we see Scott manifest throughout the movie could be symbolized in one of these boyfriends, but instead you have one who's a vegan, you have one who's, you have these twins, and it's like you have the girl that she dated briefly, and it's like all of these people are not exactly, like, they could be funhouse reflections of Scott, which would make it for an interesting thematic resonance, but it doesn't have that. But visually, the movie looks cool, and I think that, like, what's going on in the plot is interesting enough where it's like, okay, it's worth a watch, but at the same time, I don't think that there's enough in the movie for it is the ultimate style over substance movie, where it's like there is no substance to anything that's happening here. It's all the style. It's all, look at how cool this looks, and how much it looks like a video game, and how much it feels like a graphic novel, and all of that, which is a big difference. But I think we'll wrap up there for today. Our next episode, let me check. Oh, this one's cool. Next episode is going to be Searching, because Missing comes out next week. It's a horror movie that's meant to be told entirely through a screen. So we're going to be covering that. Tomorrow, because this is going up Tuesday, so tomorrow, Wednesday, on Exploring Hyperspace Lanes, which the link to find it is in the description. We're going to be covering A New Hope, me and Josie. If you go over to 30-minute reviews, we did Willow, regrettably, and we also did, what was the other thing we just did? We did our year in review, me and Peter, where we discussed all of the top 10 movies that we had last year, our favorite things that came out in 2022. We also discussed all of our favorite, like our favorite books, our favorite TV shows, and our Game of the Year picks, as well as did a movie draft. All of that's over on Beware of Spoilers. We also have coming up this week the finale of Willow on Friday. We have The Bad Batch, Episode 3, on Thursday. Friday night, I will be covering, in a higher quality version, akin to this, I will be covering A Man Called Otto. And then what else we're doing this weekend is kind of up in the air. I think Plane comes out and The Devil Conspiracy also comes out, but Josie and I do have to record next week's episode of Exploring Hyperspace Lanes, where we'll talk about Andor, and we'll also be talking about what's it called? We'll also be talking about the news about a new Star Wars movie potentially shooting in April. We also have a calendar. If you go to multipleworldproductions.com, all one word, and /news, it'll be the pinned blog post on there is about our schedule for the month of January, which again is subject to change. But until then, have a great rest of your week.